Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing something a little bit different. We are looking over 100 criminals that we have covered in the past year. And through research I can tell you that there have been some changes to the cases. Are they still in prison? Have they passed away? Or are they currently free? We're going to be doing this quick fire 100 criminals to celebrate the fact that the channel has hit 10k subs. Thank you so much for all your support, but let's get straight into these cases. 1. Ian Huntley. On the 4th of August 2002, he took the lives of two 10-year-old girls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, who were lured into his home. He was the school caretaker. It's believed he was able to invite them in by telling them Maxine Carr, his girlfriend, who was a teaching assistant at the girls' school, would be home soon. At the time, Maxine gave him an alibi, and they both spoke to the media and helped with the searches. The two best friends were found near a local RAF bunker. Maxine was proven to be lying, and Ian Huntley was arrested and charged with the murder of both girls. While waiting for his trial on the 9th of June 2003, he attempted to take his own life. Staff initially feared that he may pass away as a result of this, but he was returned to prison within 48 hours. On the 5th of November 2003, Huntley was charged with 2 counts of murder. He entered a plea of not guilty. Maxine Carr was charged with 2 counts of assisting an offender and 1 count of perverting the course of justice. On the 29th of September 2005, Huntley was found guilty and told he had to serve a minimum of 40 years imprisonment. Huntley avoided a whole life tariff as the passing of the Criminal Justice Act 2003 had been 1 day after his conviction. This meant it would take effect on the 18th of December 2003, applying solely to murders committed on or after this date. Maxine Carr was released on probation from Foston Hall Prison on the 14th of May 2004 after serving just 21 months imprisonment. On the 14th of September 2005, while in Wakefield Prison, another inmate threw boiling hot water across Ian Huntley. Mark Hobson did this because Huntley was a child killer. The injuries Huntley received in this attack resulted in him being unable to attend a hearing at which his minimum term of imprisonment was decided. Following this attack, Huntley alleged that prison authorities had failed in their duty of care towards him and launched a claim for £15,000 in compensation. He was awarded £2,500 in legal aid. In 2011, Damien Folks attacked Huntley with a homemade weapon at Franklin Prison. This meant that Huntley had to have 21 stitches. Folks actually asked the prison officers if Huntley had passed away and expressed his regret that he hadn't. Damien Folks also attacked another child killer, Colin Hatch. He was ordered to serve a minimum of 20 years for attempting to take the life of Huntley and for the manslaughter of child killer Colin Hatch. Ian Huntley is 51 years old and remains in Franklin Prison. 2. Russell Causley took the life of his wife Carol Packman in Bournemouth in June 1985, although he wasn't charged at first. Russell then faked his own death off the coast of Guernsey as part of an insurance scam in 1993. He was convicted and jailed for fraud in 1995. After this conviction, Dorset police reinvestigated the disappearance of his wife Carol Packman. Russell Causley was convicted of her murder on the 18th of December 1996 and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 16 years. He appealed against his conviction in 1998, but the conviction was upheld. In June 2003, his conviction was overturned by the Court of Appeal following another appeal, and the judge ordered a retrial. At his retrial in 2004, he was once again found guilty of murder. He became able to apply for parole in 2012. After several hearings, he was eventually granted parole in 2020. In December 2021, he was returned to prison after breaching his licence conditions. In January 2022, it was said he had been referred to the parole board once again. He had been recalled to prison for losing touch with authorities. On the 12th of December 2022, he attended a parole board hearing at which he admitted responsibility for his wife's murder. The hearing was the first in England and Wales to be held in public. On the 5th of January 2023, the parole board concluded that he should be released again. He was released in 2023 and remains free. 3. Harold Shipman was also known as Fred Shipman. He was a GP and a serial killer. He is considered to be one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history, with an estimated 284 victims over 30 years. On the 31st of January 2000, Shipman was convicted of taking the lives of 15 patients under his care. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order. On the 13th of January 2004, one day before his 58th birthday, Shipman took his own life in Wakefield Prison. He did this so his wife could have his NHS pension. 4. Arthur Hutchinson. Arthur Hutchinson had spent 5 years in prison for the attempted murder of his half-brother, Dino, and had several convictions for SA. On the morning of the 28th of September 1983, he arrived at Selby Police Station after being arrested on suspicion of theft and R. He asked to go to the toilet, and whilst there he jumped out of the window. While on the run, on the night of the 23rd of October 1983, he broke into the home of Basil Leitner, who was 59 years old, and his wife Avril, and their 28-year-old son Richard. He then took the lives of all 3 of them. He continued and R'd their 18-year-old daughter Nicola. He was finally caught in a farm in Hartlepool on the 5th of November 1983. He was found guilty of all 3 murders and the R on the 14th of September 1984. He was handed a whole life tariff. In 2008, Hutchinson had a domestic appeal against whole life tariffs dismissed by the Court of Appeal. Then in 2015, the European Court of Human Rights threw out his case. He is 84 years old and remains in Franklin Prison. 5. Colin Pitchfork. Colin Pitchfork was the first person convicted of R and murder using DNA profiling after he took the lives of 2 girls, Linda Mann in November 1983 and Dawn Ashworth in July 1986. He was arrested on the 19th of September 1987 and sentenced to life imprisonment on the 22nd of January 1988 after he pled guilty to both murders. The judge gave him a 30-year minimum term. He was actually granted parole in June 2021 and released on licence on the 1st of September that same year. On the 19th of November that same year, he was recalled to prison for breaching his licence conditions. Pitchfork was granted parole a second time in June 2023, but there was an intervention from the Lord Chancellor Alex Chalk. It was then the parole board decided not to release him. In February this year, there was actually another appeal hearing, and in this hearing it heard the first time that he was sent back to prison after being released was because he approached a lone woman while litter pickering. It's also been said that there is allegations against him in prison that he essayed another prisoner. At this stage, he has been declined parole and remains in Wakefield Prison. He is 64 years old. 6. Peter Sutcliffe, known as the Yorkshire Ripper, was convicted of taking the lives of 13 women and attempting to take the lives of 7 others between 1975 and 1980. He was sentenced to 20 life sentences, which were converted to a whole life order in 2010. 2 of the crimes took place in Manchester and all of the others took place in West Yorkshire. After his arrest in Sheffield by South Yorkshire Police for driving with a false number plate in January 1981, he was transferred to the custody of West Yorkshire Police, who questioned him about the crimes. He confessed to being the Yorkshire Ripper, saying that the voice of God had sent him on a mission to take the lives of ladies of the night. He was found sane at his trial but was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He began his prison sentence at Parkhurst Prison on the 22nd of May. Attempts to send him to a secure psychiatric unit were blocked. While at Parkhurst Prison, he was seriously assaulted by James Costello, who was 35 years old and a career criminal with convictions of violence. On the 10th of January 1983, he followed Sutcliffe into a recess of F2, the hospital wing at Parkhurst, and used a broken coffee jar to try and attack him. In March 1984, Sutcliffe was sent to Broadmoor Hospital under Section 47 of the Mental Health Act 1983. On the 23rd of February 1996, Sutcliffe was attacked in his room at Broadmoor Hospital by Paul Wilson, who was a convicted robber. He asked Sutcliffe to borrow a videotape before attempting to take his life. After an attack by another inmate, Ian Kay, on the 10th of March 1997, Sutcliffe lost the vision in his left eye and his right eye was severely damaged. Kay admitted to trying to take the life of Sutcliffe and was ordered to be detained in a secure mental hospital without limit of time. In 2003, the media reported that Sutcliffe had developed diabetes. On the 22nd of December 2007, Sutcliffe was again attacked by a fellow inmate, Patrick Sarida, who lunged at him with a bladed weapon while shouting, Peter Sutcliffe died at North Durham Hospital at the age of 74 on the 13th of November 2020 from COVID and diabetes-related complications. He had previously returned to Franklin Prison following treatment for a suspected heart attack at the same hospital 2 weeks prior. There were some reports in the media about how long and how slow it took prison staff to get him to hospital when he began to be very unwell. And if these reports are true, I can't say I blame them. 7. Colin Norris. A police investigation showed that Norris was on duty when 5 patients fell into comas. Suspicions were raised when Norris predicted that healthy Ethel Hall would pass away at around 5:15 a.m. one night, which is when she fell into a coma and then passed away. Tests revealed that she had been injected with an extremely high level of man-made insulin. Insulin was also missing from the hospital fridge, and Norris had last accessed it only half an hour before she fell unconscious. Investigations would find that the unnatural attacks followed him when he was transferred to a second hospital, and hospital records revealed that only he could not be eliminated as a suspect. Detectives believe that Norris was responsible for up to 6 other suspicious deaths. Norris is believed to have been inspired by Jessie McTavish, a fellow Scottish nurse who was convicted of taking the life of a patient with insulin in 1974 before having her conviction quashed in 1975. Norris was found guilty and handed a whole life tariff. He appealed against his conviction in 2009, but it was rejected. The Criminal Case Review Commission was given scientific information that the test which had established that Ethel Hall's blood had insulin was inaccurate, and that it was therefore not possible for her to have been murdered by an overdose of insulin. In February 2021, the CCRC stated that after a detailed review of this complex and difficult case, they decided to refer the case to the Court of Appeal. His newest appeal was actually launched this week. In support by his family, friends and other experts, he has spent 17 years in prison. This appeal will decide if the scientific evidence was unreliable, and if so, he could get a retrial. He is 49 years old and remains in prison. 8. Lawrence Bierton. On the 25th of June 1995, Lawrence Bierton and Micheal Pluck took the lives of 79-year-old Eileen Dudhill and her 72-year-old sister Elsie Gregory. The 2 men were their gardeners and were stealing from them. The sisters discovered this, and they reacted by taking the sisters' lives. They then piled the sisters' living room furniture over them and set it all on fire. They were both jailed for life at Sheffield Crown Court in 1996. Micheal Pluck died in Rye Hill Prison on the 13th of February 2012. After failed appeals in 2002 and 2010, Bierton was actually released on licence in 2017. He was recalled to prison in 2018 but was released on licence yet again in 2020. On the 9th of November 2021, he took the life of his 73-year-old neighbour, Pauline Quinn. It was said his abuse of drug and alcohol was considered by the prosecution to be a factor. In January 2023, the probation service released their review of the case. Actually, a local MP, Brendan Clark Smith, called for a public inquiry. On the 20th of December 2023, he received a whole life sentence. The probation service simply apologised to the families for its failings. 9. Dennis Nilsen. Dennis Nilsen took the lives of at least 12 young men and boys between 1978 and 1983. He was convicted at the Old Bailey of 6 counts of murder and 2 of attempted murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on the 4th of November 1983 with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 25 years. This was later changed to a whole life tariff in December 1994. He began his sentence at Wormwood Scrubs Prison. As a Category A prisoner, he was assigned his own cell and could mix freely with other inmates. He didn't lodge an appeal accepting that the Crown's case, he had the capacity to control his actions and that he had killed them with premeditation. He thought it was correct. He further elaborated on the day of his conviction that he took an enormous thrill from the social seduction and being able to take the life of these boys. Nilsen also claimed drunkenness was the sole reason at least 2 of his attempted crimes were unsuccessful. In December 1983, Nilsen was cut on the face and chest by an inmate named Albert Moffat, resulting in injuries. He required 89 stitches. He was then transferred to Parkhurst Prison and then transferred to Wakefield Prison, where he remained until 1990. In 1991, he was transferred as a vulnerable prisoner to Full Sutton Prison after concerns surrounding his safety. He remained there until 1993, where he was transferred to Whitemoor Prison. He was a Category A prisoner and he had increased segregation from other inmates. In 2003, he was transferred to Full Sutton Prison, which is where he remained. It is said that he spent much of his free time reading and writing and was allowed to paint and compose music upon a keyboard. He also exchanged letters with numerous people who sought out his correspondence. He remained at Full Sutton Prison until he died on the 12th of May 2018. 10. Raymond Morris. Morris took the lives of 3 girls aged between 5 and 7 between 1965 and 1967. The victims were Margaret Reynolds, Diana Tift and Christine Darby. The 3 children were discovered in a vast area of countryside in Staffordshire. Morris was arrested for the attempted abduction of an intended 4th victim on the 15th of November 1968. He was convicted in February 1969 of the murder of 7-year-old Christine Darby. He was never charged with the murders of the first 2 victims, although a police spokesman informed the media all investigators involved in his case remained convinced that all 3 children had been murdered by Morris. As well as the murder charge, he was also found guilty of 2 counts of SA against his niece and the attempted abduction of Margaret Alton. He was transferred from Winson Green Prison to Durham Prison on the 19th of February to begin his life sentence. He made an appeal against his conviction in November 1969, but it was dismissed. Morris died at Preston Prison on the 11th of March 2014 at the age of 84 from natural causes. He had spent 45 years in prison. 10 days before his death, he signed a disclaimer rejecting any further active medical treatment and stating he did not wish his family to be informed of his decision. He never showed any remorse for his crimes and never confessed to taking the lives of the 3 victims. 11. Stephen Ling. Stephen Ling was jailed for life in 1998 for taking the life of Joanna Tulip, who was 29 years old. This happened on Christmas Day in 1997. Ling was 23 years old at the time of the crime and was sentenced to 27 years minimum. In 2021, he went to the parole board, but this was declined. In 2025, this happened again. He was actually released in January of this year. Two psychologists agreed that Ling should be freed from prison and spoke about him having shame about his past. His release was subject to conditions which included informing the authorities of any relationships he might develop, being subject to monitoring and a curfew, and staying out of an exclusion zone to avoid contact with his victim's family. He is currently free. 12. Lucy Letby. Letby was convicted of taking the lives of 7 infants and the attempted murders of 7 others between June 2015 and June 2016. She came under investigation following a high number of unexpected infant deaths which occurred at the unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital 3 years after she began working there. Letby was charged in November 2020 with 7 counts of murder and 15 counts of attempted murder. She pleaded not guilty. The evidence that the prosecution presented was that Letby's presence was at a high number of deaths, 2 abnormal blood test results, and skin discoloration interpreted as a diagnosis of insulin poisoning and air embolism. There were also inconsistencies in medical records, her removal of nursing handover sheets from the hospital, and her behaviour and communications, including handwritten notes interpreted as a confession. In August 2023, she was found guilty on the 7 counts. She was found not guilty on 2 counts of attempted murder, and the jury could not reach a verdict on the remaining 6 counts. She was given a whole life order. Various experts have expressed doubts about the validity of her convictions due to contention over her medical and statistical evidence, technical errors, and the lack of a clear motive. Medical professionals contested the diagnosis as not sufficient for criminal evidence. 2 applications for permission to appeal have been rejected by the Court of Appeal. An application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission and a new application to the Court of Appeal are pending. She remains in prison while waiting for the appeal's decision. 13. Stephen Akinmurele was charged with taking the lives of 5 elderly people between 1995 and 1999. He was initially charged with taking the life of an elderly couple, Eric Boardman and Joan Boardman. His third suspected crime was the murder of Jemima Cargill. After Cargill, he was also charged with the murder of Dorothy Harris and Marjorie Ashton. He had a history of mental illness and had committed crimes against the elderly from the age of 11. He was drawn to situations in which he would encounter the elderly, with the police asserting he got a kick out of taking the lives of old people. He confessed to a number of the crimes, but took his own life before his trial. Police believe he may have also been responsible for 2 other crimes. He took his own life in Manchester prison in August 1999, just weeks before his trial. He had made 2 previous attempts, and his girlfriend had warned prison authorities that he was a danger to himself. A note was found in his pocket after he had passed away, writing, "I know it's not right, always thinking like this, but it's always on my mind. I can't help the way I feel. What I did was wrong. I know that, and I feel for them, but it doesn't mean I won't do it again. I'll keep on having this feeling. I'm going mad because I can't take any more of this, and that's why I'm saying goodbye." He was 21 years old. 14. Levi Bellfield. He was found guilty on the 25th of February 2008 of taking the lives of Marsha MacDonald and Amélie de Lagrange and the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order. On the 23rd of June 2011, he was found guilty of the murder of Millie Dowler. On both occasions, the judge imposed a whole life order, meaning that Bellfield will serve the sentence without the possibility of parole. He was the first prisoner to have received 2 whole life orders. In 2024, he submitted an application for a civil partnership, which meant that he wanted to be married whilst in prison. This was declined this year. He remains in Franklin Prison and is 56 years old. 15. Lawson Natty was convicted of the manslaughter in connection of the death of 14-year-old Gordon Galtz. He was sentenced to just 2 years and 8 months, but he didn't even serve this. Due to prison overcrowding measures, he was set for early release and was released just 5 months into his sentence in September last year. He is currently free. 16. Mary Ann Cotton. She took the life of 21 people between 1865 and 1873. She was sent to the gallows for poisoning and killing her stepson, but it came to light that she had actually taken the lives of many more people, including 11 out of her 13 children. She also killed 3 out of her 4 husbands, her motivation being to access their insurance policies. Her weapon of choice was arsenic, which was a deadly poison. She was sent to the gallows at Durham. She didn't actually pass away from the gallows, but passed away because the rope was set too short. People think this was on purpose. This happened on the 24th of March 1873. She was 40 years old. 17. John Childs. John Childs was also known as Bruce Childs, and he was a hitman from East London. He was convicted in 1979 for a series of contract killings, although none of the victims have been found. He implicated Terry Pinfold and Harry McKenney in the crimes, but they were released in 2003 after the judge ruled that Childs was a pathological liar. In 1998, he confessed in an interview by the Daily Mirror that he had taken the lives of 5 more people, but these were never proven to be true. He served his sentence first at Winchester Prison and then was transferred to Long Lartin Prison. He is currently in Franklin Prison. 18. Victorino Chua. In 2011, deaths occurred at Stephen Hill Hospital in Stockport in Greater Manchester. Suspicions were raised and an inquiry was launched. 46-year-old Victorino Chua, a nurse at the hospital, was arrested after claims that forms had been altered and patients were given extra medication. He was later also questioned on earlier deaths at the hospital. He was not charged with any offence and was placed on police bail. By July 12, 2012, it stated they were making good progress in the investigation, that 22 people had been poisoned and that 7 deaths had occurred. On the 29th of March 2014, he was charged with the murders of Tracy Arden, Arnold Lancaster and Alfred Derrick Weaver and 31 other offences, including grievous bodily harm and attempted poisoning. He was a Filipino national and he was given life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. He will be 84 years old when he can apply for parole. He is 59 years old and remains in Strangeways Prison. 19. Joanna Dennehy. Kevin Lee was a property developer, landlord and lover of Dennehy. Lucas was a Polish national and met Dennehy through a shared interest in drink and substances, and John Chapman was her housemate. Lucas was killed at some point between the 19th and 29th of March 2013 by her. Both Lee and Chapman had their lives taken on the 29th of March. After she took their lives, Dennehy was driven by her friend Gary Stretch to Hereford, where she then tried to attack 2 men. They were chosen at random and thankfully they both survived. She was arrested shortly after. In November 2013, she pleaded guilty to all 3 murders and 2 further attempted murder sentences. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with an additional order that she could never be released due to the premeditation of each murder. The judge further said that Dennehy lacked the normal range of human emotions. While she was on remand before trial, she was housed in a segregation unit at Bronzefield Prison. Prison staff found an escape plot in her diary which involved taking the life of a prison officer. After her sentencing, she was returned to Bronzefield Prison. In 2018, she requested permission to marry her cellmate Hayley Palmer. This was declined. In 2018, Dennehy and Palmer tried to take their own lives during a pact. In June 2020, Dennehy was reported to be in a relationship with another prisoner, Emma Atkin, but in 2019 she was moved to Low Newton Prison. Upon her arrival, she allegedly threatened to take the life of Rose West. Rose West was then moved to another prison. The government has denied this claim. She remains in Low Newton Prison and is 41 years old. 20. Micheal Steele. Micheal Steele was jailed for taking the lives of 3 drug dealers in Essex in December 1995. Tony Tucker, Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe were gunned down in a Range Rover on the 6th of December 1995 on a farm track in Essex. All 3 men were known drug dealers who were involved with the notorious gang, the Essex Boys. They were found the following morning by a farmer. He was jailed alongside Jack Womes, both of whom received life sentences for the murders. Both men have continuously pleaded their innocence since being convicted of the crime. In March 2022, Steele had been downgraded from a Category A prisoner, meaning he was no longer thought to be a high risk and could be moved to a less strict jail. Holmes was released from prison on parole in 2021 after 22 years inside. Steele has served the majority of his sentence at Wakefield Prison. The 82-year-old was cleared for release by the parole board in February this year, although the Justice Secretary appealed against the decision last month. He has appealed again to be released and he could be set free this year. 21. Stephen Port. Stephen Port was convicted of taking the lives of 4 young men and multiple R's and SAs of several others. He received a whole life order on the 25th of November 2016. He appealed his conviction in August 2018. By November 2018 it was announced that his appeal had been rejected. He actually started writing letters to someone he thought was a young gay man. It turned out it was actually an author. In these letters he talked about Star Wars and the Transformers and also boasted about how intelligent he is. He also denied his crimes. He is 50 years old and remains in prison. 22. Rose and Fred West. Rose and Fred West collaborated and took the lives of at least 9 young women between 1973 and 1987. Rose West took the life of her 8-year-old stepdaughter Charmaine in 1971. The majority of the crimes took place at their house in Gloucester. Fred West took his own life in prison the same year he was awaiting trial, following the couple's arrest in 1994. Rose West is currently an inmate at Newhall Prison in West Yorkshire after being convicted in 1995 of 10 murders. She is 71 years old. 23. Robert Black. Robert Black was a Scottish serial killer who was convicted of the kidnapped and murder of 4 girls aged between 5 and 11 in a series of crimes committed between 1981 and 1986. He was convicted of the kidnapping and murder of 3 girls on the 19th of May 1994. He was also convicted of kidnapping a 4th girl and had earlier been convicted of kidnapping an SA of a 5th. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 35 years. In 2011, Black was further convicted of the 1981 SA and murder of 9-year-old Jennifer Cardy. He is the prime suspect in the disappearance of 13-year-old Jeanette Tate. He also may have been responsible for several other unsolved child murders throughout Britain, Ireland and Europe between 1969 and 1987. He worked driving lorries across the country and Europe. He died of a heart attack in prison in 2016 at the age of 68. 24. John Cooper. John Cooper is also known as the Bullseye Killer. On the 26th of May 2011, he was given a whole life order for the 1985 double murder of siblings Richard and Helen Thompson, and the 1989 double murder of Peter and Gwenda Dixon. The murders were known in the media as the Pembrokeshire murders or the Coastal murders. Cooper was also sentenced for the R of a 16-year-old girl and an essay on a 15-year-old girl, both carried out while a group of 5 teenagers were held in March 1996 in a wooded area. Cooper had a huge history of criminal activities, including 30 robberies and violent assaults. Footage from the TV game show Bullseye in May 1989. He appeared as a contestant. This was later used as evidence against him, comparing his image with a sketch of a suspect in the Dixons' murder. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison in 1998 for robbery. He was released from prison in January 2009. Because of developments in DNA and forensic science, the police carried out a cold case review in April 2009 and were able to identify Cooper's firearm as being the weapon. Further DNA evidence was provided by another forensic scientist. The police collected the further evidence against him, and Cooper was arrested again in May 2009. He was convicted on the 26th of May 2011 for the double murders and essays and sentenced to 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. In September 2011, he launched an appeal against his convictions, and this was rejected. In April 2023, he made an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission requesting a review of his conviction. This has been denied. Cooper was also diagnosed as a psychopath. He remains in prison and is 80 years old. 25. Robert Thompson and Jon Venables. On the 12th of February 1993 in Merseyside, the 2 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and Jon Venables, abducted and took the life of 2-year-old James Patrick Bolger. Thompson and Venables led him away from the New Strand shopping centre, where he was visiting shops with his mother. They then took him to a railway line and took his life. Thompson and Venables were charged on the 20th of February 1993. They were found guilty on the 24th of November, making them the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. They were sentenced to indefinite detention at Her Majesty's pleasure and remained in custody until a parole board decision in June 2001 recommended their release on a lifelong licence at the age of 18. Thompson was detained at Bierton Moss Secure Children's Home, which was then known as Bierton Moss Secure Care Centre. Venables was detained in Vardy House, which is in a unit at the Red Bank Secure Unit in St Helens. When they were released, it was reported that both boys were given new identities and moved to secret locations under a witness protection-like programme. Once released in 2002, Venables started taking substances, drinking heavily and downloading illegal images. In September 2002, Venables was arrested on suspicion of a fray following a fight outside a nightclub. He claimed he was acting in self-defence, and the charges were later dropped after he agreed to go on an AA course. 3 months later, he was found to be in possession of substances and he was subjected to a curfew. In 2005, when Venables was at the age of 23, his probation officer met another girlfriend of his who was aged 17. After a number of young girlfriends, it was presumed that Venables was having a delayed adolescence. In 2008, a new probation officer said that Venables spent a great deal of leisure time playing video games and on the internet. In February 2010, they reported that he feared that his new identity had been compromised at his place of work. When the officer arrived at his flat, Venables was attempting to remove or destroy the hard drive of his computer. The officer's suspicions were aroused and the computer was taken away for examination, which led to the discovery of illegal images and material on his device. On the 2nd of March 2010, the Ministry of Justice revealed that Venables had been returned to prison. for violating his licence. On the 21st of June 2010, Venables was charged with possession and distribution of indecent images. It was alleged that he had downloaded 57 images over a 12-month period to February 2010, and that he had allowed other people to access these files through a peer-to-peer network. He was released again, and on the 23rd of November 2017 it was reported that Venables had again been recalled to prison for possession of imagery. The Ministry of Justice declined to comment on the reports. On the 5th of January 2018, Venables was charged with unspecified offences relating to images. On the 7th of February 2018, he pleaded guilty to possession of indecent images for a second time. He was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison. In September 2020, he was denied parole, and on the 13th of December 2023, Venables was again denied parole, with the parole board saying that the panel was not satisfied that release at this point would be safe for the protection of the public. Thompson has never been recalled or gone back to prison, and Venables remains in prison still. They are 42 years old. 26. Joseph Kappen. Joseph Kappen arred and took the lives of 3 teenage girls in Wales in 1973. He is also suspected of committing a 4th murder in February 1976. All 3 of his victims were 16 years old girls. He would lure them into his car on a Saturday evening in Swansea. All 3 were driven to rural locations where he arred them and took their life. He was never arrested for his crimes and died of lung cancer in 1990, but he is notable for being the first person to be identified as a serial killer via familiar DNA profiling. He was also the first documented serial killer in Welsh history. Kappen is also suspected of having committed a numerous number of unsolved Rs in Wales. 27. Peter Moore. Peter Moore managed a cinema in Holyhead in North Wales at the time of his arrest. He took the lives of 4 men in 1995. Due to his attire of a black shirt and tie, he was dubbed the Man in Black in the media. Between September and December 1995, he took the lives of the 4 men, which he said was for fun. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1996 with a recommendation that he would never be released. He also committed 39 attacks on men in North Wales and the Merseyside area over a 20-year period. During his trial, he told the jury the crimes were committed by a fictional gay lover he had nicknamed Jason after the killer in the Friday the 13th horror films. The jury found him guilty on all counts. In June 2008, Moore was told by the High Court that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. On the 3rd of March 2011, he challenged the ruling in the European Court of Human Rights with a view to having his sentence quashed and such whole-life order sentences outlawed throughout Europe. On the 17th of January 2012, it was announced that his appeal had failed. He is 78 years old and remains in prison. 28. Kenneth Noye. Kenneth Noye was acquitted in 1985 of the murder of a police officer in the grounds of his home, but was convicted in 1986 of conspiracy to handle stolen goods from the Brinksmat robbery and sentenced to 14 years imprisonment. He served 8 years in custody. While on licence, he took the life of Stephen Cameron during a road rage incident. He was arrested for the murder in Spain after a 2-year manhunt and sentenced to life imprisonment. He was released on licence from the murder sentence in 2019, and he is currently free. 29. Peter Tobin. Peter Tobin was a serial killer who got given a whole life order. for 3 murders committed between 1991 and 2006. Police also investigated Tobin over the deaths and disappearances of other young women and girls. Tobin served 10 years in prison for the and indecent assault of 2 girls in 1993. He was released in 2004. 3 years later, he was sentenced to life with a minimum of 21 years for the and murder of Angelica Cluck in Glasgow in 2006. The remains of 2 teenagers who went missing in 1991 were later found at his former home in Margate in Kent. Tobin was then convicted of the murder of Vicky Hamilton in December 2008, resulting in his minimum sentence being increased to 30 years, and then of the murder of Dina McNichol in December 2009. Tobin was diagnosed as a psychopath while in prison, and it's thought he might be connected with the Bible John murders of the late 1960s, but the police have currently ruled him out. He served his time in Edinburgh prison, and in July 2015 he was slashed with a blade whilst he was sleeping. His cellmate, 31-year-old double Ara, Sean Monaghan, pleaded guilty to the attack in October and was sentenced to 32 more months in prison. Tobin died on the 8th of October 2022 at the age of 76. He was cremated on the 16th of October 2022 and his ashes were scattered at sea after no relatives or no next of kin claimed him. 30. Archibald Hall was a Scottish serial killer and thief. He was born in Glasgow and became known as the Killer Butler or the Munster Butler after committing crimes while working in service to members of the British higher class. He was convicted at the courts in London and Scotland of 4 murders. The murder of Dorothy Scott Elliott was ordered to lie on file. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. In Scotland, in Edinburgh, it was recommended that he serve a minimum of 15 years, and in England, the judge handed down a recommendation that he never be released. He published his autobiography, A Perfect Gentleman, in 1999. He died of a stroke in Kingston Prison, Portsmouth, in 2002 at the age of 78. At that time, he was the oldest of more than 70,000 prisoners in British prisons and the oldest to be serving a whole life tariff. 31. Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright is also known as a Suffolk Strangler. He is currently serving life imprisonment for taking the lives of 5 women in Ipswich. These took place during the final months of 2006, and Wright was found guilty in February 2008 and given a whole life order. On the 3rd of June 2024, Wright was charged with the murder of 17-year-old schoolgirl Victorino Chua. She had her life taken in 1999. The police opened a cold case review. He is still being investigated in connection with other unsolved murders and disappearances. Some of the unsolved murders that the police are currently investigating that he could be linked to are Natalie Pearman, Amanda Duncan, and Micheal Beatles. He is 67 years old and is currently in Long Larton Prison. 32. Harry Roberts. Harry Roberts was a career criminal and murderer who in 1966 instigated the Shepherd's Bush murders. 3 police officers had their lives taken. The murders took place after plainclothes officers approached a standard estate car in which Roberts and 2 other men were sitting in near Wormwood Scrubs prison in London. Roberts feared the officers would discover firearms his gang were planning to use in a robbery. He took the life of 2 other officers. His 2 gang members took the life of the 3rd. After Roberts had spent nearly 48 years in prison in 2014, the Parole Board for England and Wales approved his release at the age of 78, having far exceeded his minimum term of 30 years. He was one of the United Kingdom's longest-serving prisoners, having remained in custody since 1966. His release was not well seen in the media due to the nature of his crime. 33. Graham Young. Graham Young is also known as a teacup poisoner. He took his victims' lives, obviously, by poison. He was obsessed with poison from a very young age, and he started poisoning the food and drink of relatives and school friends. He was caught when his teacher became suspicious and contacted the police. Young pleaded guilty to 3 non-fatal poisonings at the age of 14 and was detained at Broadmoor Hospital. He later took responsibility for the death of his stepmother, though this has not been proven. After being released in 1971, Young got a job in a factory where he began poisoning his colleagues, resulting in 2 fatalities and several critical illnesses. He was convicted on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder in 1972. He served most of his sentence at Parkhurst Prison. He died of a heart attack there in 1990. 34. Roy Whiting. Roy Whiting took the life of Sarah Payne in July 2000. He was convicted of the abduction and the murder of Sarah Payne in December 2001 and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 50 years. In June 2004, Whiting applied to the Court of Appeal for a reduction of his sentence. His lawyers argued that the 50-year tariff was politically motivated, as the decision was made at a time when the government was under fire from the public and media over a firefighters' strike. On the 9th of June 2010, a High Court judge reduced his sentence by 10 years. He will be able to apply for parole in 2041, when he will be 82 years old. On the 4th of August 2002, he was attacked in Wakefield Prison by another prisoner. In June 2004, convicted murderer Ricky Trigakis was found guilty of carrying out the attack, which left him with a scar on his right cheek. In July 2011, he was attacked again. His injuries were not life-threatening, no charge was pressed by Whiting, and no police investigation was undertaken. A third attack on Whiting took place on the 8th of November 2018, where he was attacked by 2 other prisoners in his cell. He was taken to hospital for treatment but was returned to prison shortly after in a stable condition. On the 11th of February 2024, he was attacked again at Wakefield Prison. A spokesman for the West Yorkshire Police said at 5:14 p.m. on Sunday the 11th of February 2024, police received a call from a member of staff at Wakefield Prison, reporting a male prisoner had been stabbed. His injuries were described as minor. He is 66 years old and remains in Wakefield Prison. 35. Ian Watkins. Ian Watkins is a Welsh former singer who is best known as a lead singer for the rock band Lost Prophets. His career ended after he was sentenced to 29 years imprisonment in 2013 for multiple offences, including SA of young children and infants and the possession of extreme images. His sentence was later increased by 10 months for having a mobile phone in prison. In March 2018, Watkins was found with a mobile phone. He was accused of using the phone to maintain contact with a girlfriend outside of prison, but denied the charge, claiming it did not belong to him but to 2 inmates who were forcing him to hide it for them. He refused to give names, citing fear of violence response. A charger for the phone was also found in his cell. On the morning of the 5th of August 2023, Watkins was taken hostage by 3 other inmates at Wakefield Prison. He was attacked but was freed by prison officers 6 hours later. Police confirmed his injuries were not life-threatening. It was later claimed that the motive for the attack was an unsettled £900 substance debt with another prisoner whilst in custody, with the makeshift weapon being a sharpened toilet brush. It's been reported that Ian Watkins gets lots of fan mail and has spent his time buying protection and friendships within Wakefield Prison. He remains in the prison and is 47 years old. 36. Donald Nilsen is also known as the Black Panther or the Phantom. He is an English armed robber and kidnapper, as well as a murderer. He carried out a series of sub-post office robberies between 1971 and 1974, taking the lives of 3 people. In 1975, he kidnapped for a £50,000 ransom Leslie Whittle, who died whilst she was being kept ransom. He was arrested later that year and convicted of 4 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment in July 1976. He remained in prison until his death in 2011. He passed away on the 17th of December in 2011. He was taken to hospital due to breathing difficulties. His condition deteriorated and he was confirmed to have died the following day at the age of 75. 37. Robert Maudsley is an English serial killer. He took the lives of 4 people, with one of the killings taking place in a psychiatric hospital and 2 in prison after receiving a life sentence for murder. Initial reports falsely stated he ate some of the men in prison, which earned him the nickname Hannibal the Cannibal from parts of the British media. Robert Maudsley's intended victims seem to be those criminals that take the lives of children. All victims are children. He is the longest serving British prisoner in solitary confinement, and he remains in Wakefield prison, although lots of the public believe that he should be released. 38. Robert Napier. He was convicted of 2 murders, 1 manslaughter, 2 Rs and 2 attempted Rs. He was sentenced to an indefinite detention at Broadmoor Hospital on the 18th of December 2008 for the manslaughter of Rachel Nicholl on the 15th of July 1992. He was previously convicted of the double murder 1993 of Samantha Bicep and her daughter Jasmine. Napier had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia as well as Asperger's syndrome. The investigation to find Nicholl's murderer resulted in the attempted prosecution of an innocent man, Colin Stagg, until in 2004, because of DNA profiling, it revealed Napier's connection to the case. On the 18th of December 2008, he was convicted of the manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He also admitted to 4 other attacks on women. He remains in Broadmoor Hospital. He is 59 years old. 39. Anthony Hardy. He is an English serial killer who was known as the Camden Ripper for taking the lives of at least 9 victims. In November 2003, he was sentenced to 3 life terms for 3 murders, but police believe he may have been responsible for up to 6 more. On the 30th of December 2002, a homeless person was scavenging in rubbish bins when they found parts of 2 women wrapped in black plastic bin liners. The victims were identified as Bridget McLennan, who was 34, and Elizabeth Ladd, who was 29. A search of his flat found evidence, including stains, and indicating the 2 women had been there and had their lives taken within the flat. Both had passed away over the Christmas holidays. Under arrest, Hardy replied no comment to every question put to him by police. In November 2003, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was diagnosed with a personality disorder. In May 2010, a High Court judge decided that Hardy should never be released from prison and placed him on the list of whole-life tariff prisoners. He passed away in Franklin Prison of pneumonia on the 25th of November 2020 at the age of 69. 40. Alun Kyte was convicted in 2000 of taking the lives of 2 ladies of the night, Samo Paul and 30-year-old Tracy Turner. He took their lives in December 1993 and March 1994. After his convictions, investigators announced their suspicions that he could have been behind a murder of other unsolved ladies of the night across Britain in the 1980s and 1990s. He was apprehended due to the groundbreaking investigations of a wider police inquiry named Operation Enigma, which was launched in 1996 in response to the murders of Paul Turner and a large number of other ladies of the night. He was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison for the murders of both women. In February 2023, he was further convicted of historical S offences against a 9-year-old boy, which he committed a violent R, indecency and threat, which began in the late 1980s and continued for 5 years. He is imprisoned at Only Prison as of May 2023 and continues to refuse to accept his guilt for any serious crime of which he has been convicted for. He is 61 years old. 41. David Smith. David Smith was cleared of the murder of 33-year-old West London Lady of the Night Sarah Crump in 1993. He was found guilty in 1999 of taking the life of 21-year-old Paddington Lady of the Night Amanda Walker. Both crimes were almost identical. He has since been linked to a number of other crimes and murders of ladies of the night across Britain. In May 2023, he was retried for the murder of Sarah Crump under double jeopardy legislation introduced in 2003, and at this time he was found guilty. He remains in Wakefield Prison and is 69 years old. 42. Peter Bryan. Peter Bryan took the lives of 3 people between 1993 and 2004. In 1994, he was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital after admitting to the murder of 21-year-old shop assistant Nisha Sheaf. By February 2001, the staff thought he had made good progress regarding his behaviour and attitude. Bryan was transferred from Rampton in June 2001 to the John Howard Centre after a 6-month trial leave project agreed by the Home Office. He was released into the care of the psychiatrist and social worker. On the 25th of April 2004, he took the life of fellow patient Richard Loudwell, who was 59 years old, while he was in Broadmoor. Bryan said that if he had not been interrupted, he would have done more. In 2011, an inquest ruled that Bryan had not been watched properly and had not been adequately assessed by Broadmoor staff. On the 15th of March 2005, he pleaded guilty at the Old Bailey to 2 manslaughters on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He is 55 years old and remains in Broadmoor Hospital. 43. Paul Brumfitt was convicted of taking the lives of 3 people in the United Kingdom and Denmark. In 1980, he was convicted of 2 counts of manslaughter and sentenced to 3 life sentences. His first murders began in July 1979 when he got into an argument with his 16-year-old girlfriend. In his anger, he went on an 8-day rampage. He took the life of 59-year-old shopkeeper Sidney Samuel in Essex. Afterwards, he jumped on a boat and found himself in Denmark, where not long after he took the life of 40-year-old bus driver Teddy Lostrop. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He remained in prison until November 1994, when psychiatrists declared that he no longer posed a threat to society, and he was released from prison. As part of his parole, he was employed by Dudley Council as an assistant gardener. Not known to his probation officer, he visited ladies of the night. On the 7th of February 1999, he picked up 19-year-old Marcella Ann Davies, who was a lady of the night, on Wolverhampton's Shakespeare Street. He took her back to his flat. He then took her life. In March 1999, he was arrested on suspicion of taking her life, but he refused to cooperate with authorities. After 30 hours had passed, he finally admitted to the murder and pointed investigators towards where he had placed her. At court, he was convicted of taking the life of Marcella and for R-ing 2 other ladies of the night at knife point. He was given 3 life sentences. He is 69 years old and remains in prison. 44. James Watson. Ricky Neve was a 6-year-old boy who had his life taken on the 28th of November 1994. His life was taken by 13-year-old James Watson. In 1996, his mother, Ruth, was tried and acquitted of his murder. Watson was arrested for the murder in April 2016. After his arrest, he fled to Portugal. He was then sent back to the UK. He was tried for the murder at London's Old Bailey from the 18th of January to the 21st of April 2022. There was new DNA findings which revealed his DNA was on Ricky's clothing. He claimed that this was from where he had lifted Ricky to see over a fence, but this fence had not been built until 1994. He was convicted of the murder on the 24th of June and was sentenced to life with a minimum of 15 years. In June 2023, Watson was granted permission to appeal his conviction. His lawyer argued before the Court of Appeal that Watson was not able to get a fair trial because too much of the evidence from which the killer's DNA could have been recovered was lost or destroyed in the years. On the 4th of September, an appeals panel of 3 judges upheld the conviction, ruling that Watson had received a fair trial. The 44-year-old remains in prison. 45. Gordon Cummins. Cummins was known as the Blackout Killer, the Blackout Ripper, and the Wartime Ripper. He took the lives of 4 women and attempted to take the lives of 2 others over a 6-day period in London in February 1942. He is also suspected of committing 2 earlier murders in October 1941. He was convicted of the murder of 34-year-old Evelyn Oatley. He was sentenced to death and went to the gallows at Wandsworth Prison on the 25th of June 1942. 46. Stephen Griffiths. He took the lives of 3 women in the city of Bradford in 2009 and 2010. 43-year-old Susan Rushworth disappeared on the 22nd of June 2009, followed by 31-year-old Shelley Armitage on the 26th of April 2010, and 36-year-old Susan Blamires on the 21st of May the same year. The women were all ladies of the nights based in Bradford. He was arrested on the 24th of May and was charged with taking the lives of all 3 women. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order. While in prison, he has attempted to take his own life on several occasions and went on a 120-day hunger strike. He remains in prison and is 56 years old. 47. James Fairweather. On the 29th of March 2014, 33-year-old James Atfield, who had a brain injury, had his life taken in Essex. 3 months later, on the 17th of June, Nahid Alamiya, a 31-year-old Saudi student of the University of Essex, also had her life taken. The teenager, James Fairweather, was arrested while planning a 3rd murder in May 2015, and in January 2016, he pleaded responsible for both deaths. In April 2016, he was found guilty of both murders and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years. In prison, he told a psychiatrist some of the most antisocial and violent thoughts the professional had ever heard. He said voices were telling him to take the life of people. He also idolised other criminals, especially the Yorkshire Ripper. He is 26 years old and remains in prison. 48. John Hay, who is also known as the acid bath murderer, took the life of 6 people, although he claimed to have taken the lives of 9. He took the lives of his victims and then disposed of them using sulfuric acid, before forging their signatures so he could sell their possessions and collect large sums of money. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. He went to the gallows on the 10th of August 1949. 49. Mary Bell. Mary Bell was 10 years old when she took the life of 2 preschool-aged boys in Newcastle in 1968. Bell was convicted of manslaughter in relation to both cases in December 1968. She went on trial in Newcastle when she was 11 years old, in which her actions were judged to have been committed under diminished responsibility. She is Britain's youngest female killer and was diagnosed as having a psychopathic personality disorder. Bell was released from custody in 1980 at the age of 23. She has a lifelong court order, which has been extended to protect the identity of her daughter and granddaughter. She has lived under a series of different names. 50. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley took the lives of 5 children in and around Manchester between 1963 and 1965. The victims were Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Leslie Ann Downey and Edwards Evans. They were aged between 10 and 17 and at least 4 were S.A.'d. 2 of the victims were discovered in 1965 on Saddleworth Moor. A 3rd was discovered there in 1987. More than 20 years after their trial, they were discovered with the help of Brady and Hindley. Bennett's body is thought to also be there, but has never been discovered. They both received whole life tariffs. Myra Hindley passed away in 2002 in West Suffolk Hospital at the age of 60 after serving 36 years in prison. Brady was diagnosed as a psychopath in 1985 and confined in high-security Ashworth Hospital. He made it clear that he wished to never be released and asked to be allowed to die. He died in 2017 at Ashworth Hospital at the age of 79. He served 51 years in prison. 51. Ronald Jebson. The Babes in the Woods murders are the murders of 2 children which occurred in Essex on the 31st of March 1970. The victims were Susan Blatchford, who was 11 years old, and Gary Hanlon, who was 12 years old. They were lured from an unknown location near their homes in North London to Epping Forest, where they were arred and murdered by Ronald Jebson. They were found on the 17th of June, 78 days after they were reported missing by their parents. The case remained unsolved for almost 30 years until 61-year-old Jebson, who was already serving a life sentence for the 1974 murder of 8-year-old girl Rosemary Paper, confessed to the and murder in 1998. He was convicted of both murders in May 2000. He died in prison in 2015. 52. Kim Edwards and Lucas Markham. Kim Edwards had a very bad relationship with her mother, Elizabeth Edwards. After she had taken her mum's life, she said, "I wanted to get revenge for the way she treated me. I did not feel anything for my mother. She deserved it, and I'm glad she's dead." There was a long strain in their relationship. In 2008, her mother Elizabeth hit 6-year-old Kim in a domestic row. After this, Elizabeth Edwards, the mother, referred herself to social services, leading to the sisters Kim and Katie to be placed in care. However, the file on the family was soon closed, and normal life seemed to resume. Yet Kim and her mother's relationship got really bad again. Kim threatened to run away and even claiming to support workers that her mother had tried to throttle her. She also made a note and told her mum that she would take her own life. This led her mum to arrange for an emergency psychiatric assessment, but they found no signs of mental illness. Kim, along with her boyfriend Lucas, decided that they would take their mother's life, as well as her sister Katie's. And on the night of April 2016, Lucas Markham walked the short distance to Kim, his girlfriend's home. She let him in through a bathroom window. He then went into Elizabeth's bedroom and took her life. After this, he went into Katie's room and took her life. They were angry that Elizabeth did not want Kim to see Lucas anymore. Kim Edwards and Lucas Markham are now serving 17.5 years behind bars. 53. Theodore Johnson. Theodore Johnson was born in Jamaica and was one of 11 children. He moved to the UK in 1980 with his wife Yvonne and started working at a car repair service centre. In 1981, an argument began between Theodore Johnson and his wife after she wouldn't let him go to church for being not dressed well enough. Johnson hit his wife over the head before pushing her out of the balcony from their 9th floor Wolverhampton home. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to just 3 years in prison. 11 years after killing his first wife, Johnson met Yvonne Bennett in Wolverhampton. They moved to North London together and Yvonne gave birth to a daughter, but they separated after Johnson discovered that she was having an affair. He began stalking Yvonne and at one point had to be removed from the house by police. This was only days before her death. In 1993, while their 2-year-old daughter was sleeping, Johnson took the life of Yvonne. He then phoned the police to confess his crime and unsuccessfully tried to take his own life. At his trial at the Old Bailey, it was claimed that he suffered from depression and a personality disorder. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He was found guilty and sent to a mental institution in September 1994. Just a year later, in 1995, he was allowed to spend 2 days at City and Guilds doing a course by himself. There he met 51-year-old mother of 4 Angela Best. She had moved to London from Manchester and they began a relationship. Johnson was released by a mental health tribunal in October 1997. In September 2016, the couple split up after Angela found out about Johnson's previous convictions. He was visited by a social worker and a psychiatrist on the 8th of December 2016. He was not found to be in a depressive state and still denied being in a relationship. On the morning of the 15th of December, Angela visited Johnson at his flat to help him with an appointment with the Jamaican embassy. Soon after entering the house, Johnson took her life. Hours afterwards, Johnson then threw himself in front of an express train at Cheshunt railway station. He lost his right arm and left hand. While the medics were treating his injuries, authorities visited his home and discovered Angela. At trial, the now wheelchair-bound Johnson confessed to taking the life of Angela Best and was sentenced to 26 years in prison. 54. David Anthony McGreevy took the life of 3 of his friend's children in 1973. He was sentenced to multiple life terms with a minimum of 20 years. In prison, he was subjected to frequent abuse by other prisoners and spent most of his 45 years behind bars in protected conditions. In 2006, he was across all the papers because he was transferred to an open prison and allowed to stay in a bail hostel in Liverpool. In December 2018, following a parole hearing, the report said he had changed over the last 45 years and legally cleared him for release on parole. He was also given a new identity. 55. Robin Liggis. In 1996, he was convicted of taking the life of Robert Young, and in 2011 he was charged with 3 additional murders. He was found guilty of 2 and was ordered to be detained in a secure hospital, having suffered from the effects of a stroke. He took the lives of Trevor Bradley, who was 53 years old, Brian Coles, who was 57 years old, and Robert Young, who was 75 years old. He died on the 16th of December 2022 at the age of 70. 56. Sarah Davey. Sarah Davey was just 14 years old when she took the life of Grandma of 3 Lily, who was 71 years old, after being invited into a terraced home in Greater Manchester for a cup of tea. She did this alongside 15-year-old pal Lisa Healy. She tortured the grandma after taking her life and then placing her in the canal. She is now released following a decision made by the parole board, and it isn't the first time she was free. She was first released in March 2013. She was understood to have been released from the women's prison near York and moved to a flat just a few miles away from the murder scene. She is currently free. 57. Bruce George Peter Lee. He confessed to a total of 11 acts of arson, pleading guilty to 26 counts of manslaughter. 14 of these were overturned in 2 separate appeals. He was sentenced to an indefinite secure hospital detention in 1981 and remains detained in Broadmoor Hospital. 58. Mark Martin. Mark Martin was handed a whole life tariff. 2 other criminals who helped him, John Ashley and Dean Carr, also received 25-year and 14-year minimum sentences. All 3 were homeless, and on the night of the 24th of January 2005, they targeted another homeless person, 25-year-old Ellen Frith. They then took the life of another homeless woman, 26-year-old Zoe Pennick. Pennick was last seen on the 31st of December 2004. Martin boasted to the homeless community of taking her life. Another homeless lady, Katie Baxter, who was 18 years old, was last seen with Zoe. It was then realised that he had taken her life also. Martin was seen as the ringleader and was convicted of all 3 murders and given life imprisonment with a whole life order. He will never be released from prison. 59. Amelia Satch and Annie Walters. They were 2 British murderers known as the Finchley baby farmers. It's estimated they took the lives of over 12 babies. They would say they would look after them for money and then take their lives. They were the first women to be sent to the gallows at Holloway Prison on the 3rd of February 1903. 60. Angus St Clair. The World's End Murders is a name given to the murders of 2 girls, Christine Eady, 17, and Helen Scott, who was 17, in Edinburgh in October 1977. It's named this because they were last seen alive leaving the World's End pub. Sinclair was actually acquitted in 2007. Following the amendment of the law of double jeopardy, which would have prevented his retrial, Sinclair was retried in October 2014 and convicted of both murders on the 14th of November 2014. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 37 years, the longest sentence by a Scottish court at that time. He passed away in prison at the age of 73 on the 11th of March 2019. These were not the only murders he was charged with. He also pleaded guilty of taking the life of his 8-year-old neighbour Catherine Rehill in Glasgow in 1961 when he was 16, and was given another life sentence in 2001 for the murder of 17-year-old Mary Gallacher on a footpath in Glasgow in 1978. Police believe he may have also killed 4 other women between 1977 and 1978. 61. John Duffy and David Mulcahy. They are 2 British RAs and serial killers who together attacked many women and children at railway stations in southern England during the 1980s. Their crimes are referred to as the railway murders, and they are referred to as the railway RAs or railway killers. Duffy went on trial in February 1988 and was convicted of 2 murders and 4 Rs, although he was also acquitted of Ring and killing Anne Locke. He was given a minimum tariff of 30 years, but later this was changed to a whole life tariff. Duffy chose not to appeal against his sentence, later claiming that he regretted his crimes and considered the sentence justified. After turning against each other, Mulcahy was convicted of 3 counts of murder and 7 counts of R, and was given 3 life sentences with a 30-year recommendation and 24 years imprisonment for each full R offence. They both remain in prison. 62. John Christie. He took the lives of at least 8 people, including his wife Ethel, inside his flat in Notting Hill in London. 3 of his victims were found in wallpaper-covered kitchen walls soon after he had moved out of the flat in March 1953. 2 other victims were discovered in the garden, and his wife Ethel was found beneath the floorboards in the front room. Christie was arrested and convicted of his wife's murder. He was sent to the gallows. 2 of his victims were Beryl Evans and her baby daughter Geraldine, who along with Beryl's husband Timothy Evans were their neighbours. Evans was charged with taking the life of his wife and his daughter and found guilty. He was sent to the gallows in 1950. Christie was actually a major prosecution witness and a big reason why Evans was sent to the gallows, even though Christie had committed these murders. Christie was sent to the gallows on the 15th of July 1953 at Pentonville Prison in London. He was 54 years old. 63. David Burgess. He took the lives of 2 9-year-old girls in 1966 and 1967. He was a local man and was found guilty, and he was handed 2 life sentences. He was given a 27-year sentence for a third in 2012 after new forensic evidence brought another conviction. At the trial, it was heard that he had been released from prison on licence in May 1996, but had failed to report to the prison when required and had been involved in incidents of drunken and violent behaviour. He was arrested in February 1998 in Portsmouth after committing an armed robbery at a Havant branch of Lloyds Bank. He was jailed for this offence for 10 years in June 1998. He was found guilty of the murders of Jeanette Wigmore and Jacqueline Williams. He remains in prison. 64. Andrew Dawson. Dawson took the life of Henry Walsh. Walsh was a shopkeeper who was 91 years old at the time of his death. Dawson attacked him and took his life. He was convicted of the murder in 1982 but was released on licence in 1999. He was returned to prison 3 times between 2003 and 2007 before being released in 2008. On the 25th of July 2010, John Matthews was found with his life taken in his flat. 5 days later, in the same area, Paul Hancock was also found with his life taken. On both occasions, Dawson placed the victims in a bathtub in their flats. On the same day Matthew was found, Dawson was arrested in connection. On the 18th of July 2011, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, and that's where he remains. 65. Amelia Dyer. She was an English serial killer who took the lives of infants in her care over a 30-year period during the Victorian era. She was trained as a nurse and widowed in 1869. She then turned to baby farming. Her crimes were discovered when a victim was discovered in the River Thames with evidence leading back to her. She was found guilty of taking the life of Doris Marmon. She was sent to the gallows on the 10th of June 1896. It's believed she may have taken the lives of up to 400 infants. 66. Stephen Grieveson, who's also known as the Sunderland Strangler. He took the lives of 4 teenage boys in a series of crimes committed between 1990 and 1994 in Sunderland. He was convicted of 3 counts of murder at Leeds Crown Court and was handed 3 life sentences on the 28th of February 1996, with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 35 years before he is able to be released. In October 2013, he was convicted of the 1990 murder of 14-year-old Simon Martin at Newcastle Crown Court and handed a 4th life sentence. He remains in Full Sutton Prison. 67. Kenneth Erskine. His first victim was Nancy Ems, who was 78 years old. She had her life taken on the 9th of April 1986. Her passing was initially believed to have been due to natural causes and declared as such by her doctor. It was only established that she had been murdered when her home help noticed that her television set was missing from her flat. His second victim was Janet Cockett, who was 67 years old and had her life taken on the 9th of June 1986 in her flat. Again, it was initially thought that she had passed away from natural causes, but then it was established that she had had her life taken. On the 28th of June 1986, he took the life of 2 victims in a residential home. One of them was a World War II veteran, Valentine Gleam, who was 85, along with Zebnu Zabrara, who was 94. Both men were essayed, and then he took their life. His 5th victim was William Carman, who was 84 years old. He stole money from the flat before taking his life on the 8th of July 1986. He then took his 6th victim's life on the 21st of July 1986. He attacked 74-year-old William Downs in his bedsit. His final victim was Florence Tisdale, who was an 83-year-old widow who lived on her own at her flat. She had her life taken and was odd on the 23rd of July 1986. He was arrested on the 28th of July 1986 at a social security office. Police were then able to match his palm print to one left at one of the crime scenes. He was identified in a police lineup by 74-year-old Fred Pretence, who claimed that he had tried to take his life a month before police had arrested him. He was found guilty of 7 murders in January 1988 and sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommended minimum term of 40 years, but has since been found to have a mental disorder within the meaning of the Mental Health Act 1983. So in 1988 he was transferred from prison under section 4749 of the Mental Health Act to the maximum security Broadmoor Hospital and has been held there ever since. While there on the 23rd of February 1996, he saved the life of serial killer Peter Sutcliffe. Sutcliffe was attacked in his room in Broadmoor Hospital. A convicted robber, Paul Wilson, asked to borrow a videotape before attempting to take his life. Erskine and convicted murderer Jamie Devitt intervened upon hearing screams and saved his life. He remains in Broadmoor Hospital. 68. Trevor Hardy. Trevor Hardy took the lives of 3 teenage girls in the Manchester area between December 1974 and March 1976. In 1977, he was found guilty of 3 charges of murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment, remaining in prison until he died 35 years later. Hardy served his sentence more than 30 years after his arrest at Wakefield Prison, where he was reported to have a good work report. He maintained his innocence and sent letters to relatives blaming his parents. On the 23rd of February 2008, The Times revealed that Hardy was one of the 50 British prisoners currently in prison who had been issued with a whole life tariff and were unlikely to ever be released. He took the lives of Janet Stewart, who was 15 in 1974, Wanda Scala, who was 17 in July 1975, and in March 1976, Sharon Mossoff, who was 17. Hardy collapsed in his cell at Wakefield Prison on the 23rd of September 2012 after suffering a heart attack. He died in hospital 2 days later at the age of 67. He had spent 35 years in Wakefield Prison. 69. Ricky Stewart. Ricky Stewart was allowed out on licence while serving a life sentence for the murder of Philip Haslip in 2003. On the 16th of August 2004, he was convicted of the murder and received a life sentence with a minimum tariff of only 8 years and 3 months. He was further sentenced on the 1st of July 2005 to a sentence of 10 years for an R and a 17-year-old extended sentence, 10 years custody and 5 years extended licence for the culpable homicide. Both of these crimes were committed in Scotland. He had also been serving time for causing the death of his mum's boyfriend Donald Nicholson in 2001 and the art of a 53-year-old grandmother in his hometown in 2003, yet he's been allowed out on licence. A prison service spokesperson said, "Ricky Stewart's crimes were horrific and our thoughts remain with his victims' families and friends. Prisoners only go on day release after being carefully risk assessed. They must abide by strict rules and face extra time behind bars if they don't comply." 70. Colin Island. He was a serial killer known as the Slayer. His victims were all gay men. Criminologist David Wilson believes that he was a psychopath and suffered from dysfunctional upbringing. He committed various crimes from the age of 16 and had served time in prisons. While living in Southend, he started frequenting a gay pub in London. He sought men who liked a passive role, so he could readily restrain them. He was actually heterosexual and had twice been married to women. He pretended to be gay only to befriend potential victims, as the crimes were not SA motivated. He was highly organised and carried a kit of rope, handcuffs and full change of clothes to each scene. After taking the life of his victims, he cleaned the flat, stayed in the flat until the morning in order to avoid suspicion. He took the lives of Peter Walker, who was 45 years old, Christopher Dunn, who was 37, Perry Bradley, who was 35, Andrew Collier, who was 33 years old, and Emmanuel Spiteri, who was Maltese and 41 years old. He was sentenced to 5 counts of life imprisonment for the murders on the 20th of December 1993 and remained in prison until he died on the 21st of February 2012 at the age of 57. 71. Patrick Mackay. Patrick Mackay is a serial killer. He was convicted of 3 counts of manslaughter and 2 additional cases which were left to lie on file. Detectives said he confessed in remand to the murders of 6 more people across London, Essex and Kent between 1973 and 1975. All of them were found to match existing unsolved murders. He was officially diagnosed as a psychopath at the age of 15 and was in and out of prison. Since being convicted, he has been denied parole many times since 1995 on the basis that he is considered too dangerous for release, although since 2017 he has been incarcerated in an open prison conditions with day release. In 2020, authorities launched fresh inquiries into his suspected murders, but they were unable to find sufficient evidence. In July 2022, it was revealed that his case had been referred to the parole board again. It was denied, although he keeps sending his case to the parole board. He remains in an open prison. 72. Nathan Matthews. Rebecca Watts was a student from Bristol who had her life taken in 2015. She was 16 years old, and in November 2015 her stepbrother Nathan Matthews was found guilty of her murder and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years. His girlfriend Shauna Hall was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 17 years in prison, although she insisted to police that she had nothing to do with the crime. Both Matthews and her were convicted of conspiracy to kidnap, preventing the lawful burial of a body, perverting the course of justice, and possession of 2 stun guns. They both lodged appeals against their convictions and sentences, but on the 23rd of June 2016 the Court of Appeal rejected their applications. Matthews remains in prison. She was released after serving less than half her sentence on the 1st of September 2023. 73. Peter Manuel. He was an American-Scottish killer who was convicted of taking the lives of 7 people across southern Scotland between 1956 until his arrest in January 1958. It's believed he has taken the life of 2 more people. He was nicknamed the Beast. He was sent to the gallows in Glasgow. He was 31 years old. 74. Robert Mone. Robert Mone was a soldier, and he was absent without leave from his army unit and went drinking for days. He entered a girls' needlework class at St John's High School wearing his uniform and armed with a firearm. He held the 14 and 15-year-old pupils and their pregnant teacher, Nanette Hansen, captive for 90 minutes. Mone's motive is assumed to be revenge for his expulsion from the school. After entering the classroom, Mone told the girls to barricade the doors and herded them into a fitting room. He fired several rounds at the classroom door. Police brought Mone's grandmother, who was unsuccessfully asked him to stop. Mone then requested that an acquaintance, 18-year-old nurse Marion Young, was brought to the school. During the standoff, Mone arred one girl, essayed another, and then shot at both women, but the gun misfired. Hansen and Young persuaded Mone to release the girls. Young pleaded with Mone to allow Hansen to be taken to hospital, and Mone told her dismissively that she could do what she wanted. Mone was arrested and Hansen taken to the Dundee Hospital, where she passed away from her injuries. On the 23rd of January 1968, Mone was found to be insane and sent to the state hospital. In 2017, a retired police officer claimed that a police sniper had Mone in his sights but was denied permission to shoot. Mone had 6 months added to his sentence in 1995 for assaulting a fellow prisoner. In 2002, his sentence was reduced to 25 years under the European Convention on Human Rights. In 2007, he was allowed out on day release. While being incarcerated, it said he has studied law and philosophy. He is Scotland's longest serving prisoner. 75. Alfred Whiteway. The towpath murders are a double murder which occurred upon a section of towpath in Teddington Lock in London on the 31st of May 1953. The victims were 2 teenage girls named Christine Reed and Barbara Songhurst, who were ambushed by a lone individual as they cycled to their homes in Hampton Hill and Teddington. Both girls were overpowered and then arred. They then had their lives taken. They were placed in the River Thames. 21-year-old Alfred Whiteway was convicted of both murders in a trial that was held at the Old Bailey. He was sent to the gallows at Wandsworth Prison on the 22nd of December 1953. 76. Jack Shepherd, also known as a speedboat killer. He has actually been released from prison after he was jailed for just 6 years over the death of 24-year-old Charlotte Brown. She passed away in 2015 after she was thrown from the boat when it capsized on the River Thames after hitting a tree trunk. Shepherd, who was 36 years old, has been freed with conditions after serving just half his sentence behind bars. He was also serving a term of 4 years for an unrelated assault. Shepherd and Miss Brown were on their first date after meeting on an online dating site. The pair had been drinking champagne and the boat was in a very poor condition. Shepherd was plucked from the Thames alive, but she was found unconscious and unresponsive and passed away later that day in hospital. The following year, Jack Shepherd handed himself into police in Georgia and was brought back to the UK, where he was also handed a 4-year jail term for attacking a barman, to run at the same time as his 6-year sentence. He was convicted of wounding with intent for hitting former soldier David Beach with a vodka bottle after being asked to leave the White Hart Hotel in Devon in March 2018. In July 2020, appeal judges ruled that the 78 days he spent in custody should count as time served, meaning an earlier release date that would have originally have been expected. He was freed in 2024. 77. Mark Bridger. Welsh girl April Jones disappeared on the 1st of October 2012 after being sighted getting into a vehicle near her home. She was only 5 years old, and this disappearance generated a large amount of national and international press coverage. Mark Bridger was arrested and later charged with April's murder. He lived near her. On the 30th of May 2013, he was found guilty in addition to perverting the course of justice. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life tariff, meaning it's unlikely he will ever be released. In July 2013, several weeks into his sentence, he was attacked in Wakefield Prison by an unnamed prisoner with an improvised weapon, resulting in facial and throat injuries for which he received treatment. In December 2013, Bridger commenced an appeal against his whole life tariff but dropped the appeal just a month later, days before it was due to be heard. He remains in Wakefield Prison. 78. Lewis Daines. He took the life of English-American teenager Breck Lefebvre Bednar on the 17th of February 2014 at his own flat in Essex. Daines had befriended him through online gaming, over time gaining and manipulating the youth's trust and isolating him from his family and friends. On February 16, 2014, Daines lured Breck to his apartment, claiming he needed his help for his supposed computer software company. The next day, Breck was subjected to an attack, and he lost his life. Daines pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. 79. Aaron Campbell. On the 2nd of July 2018, 6-year-old Scottish girl Alicia McFall was abducted from her bed and had her life taken by 16-year-old Aaron Campbell. Alicia was over to stay with her grandparents and her dad's for half-term for 3 days when Campbell entered their unlocked home at around 2 a.m. The teenager had previously bought cannabis from Alicia's father, Robert Bobby McFall, who lived in the house, and initially went to steal the drug. Upon finding the child asleep, Campbell picked her up and carried her to the grounds of a demolished hotel. He then arred and took her life. Aaron Campbell was charged and he denied any involvement and pleaded not guilty when his trial began on the 11th of February 2019. He lodged a special defence of incrimination by claiming that Robert's girlfriend, Tony, was responsible for taking the child's life and framing him. Campbell was tied to the crime by CCTV footage, DNA and fibres from his clothing, and the jury returned a guilty verdict after just 3 hours. On the 21st of March 2019, he was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 27 years. This was reduced to 24 years on appeal. He confessed to the crime before his sentencing, adding that he was quite satisfied with the murder. On the 10th of September 2019, Campbell successfully appealed his sentence, reducing it to 24 years, meaning he will be able to apply for parole when he is 40 in 2042. He is imprisoned at a youth offenders institution and will be moved to an adult prison when he turns 23. 80. Jeremy Bamber. Jeremy Bamber was convicted of the 1985 White House Farm murders. The victims were his adoptive parents, Neville and June Bamber, his adoptive sister, Sheila Keffel and his sister's 6-year-old twin sons. The prosecution had argued that after committing the crimes to secure a large inheritance, Bama had placed the rifle in the hands of his 28-year-old sister, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, to make the scene appear to be a murder-suicide. The jury returned a majority guilty verdict. Bamba is serving life imprisonment with a whole life tariff, meaning that he has no possibility of parole. He has repeatedly applied unsuccessfully to have his convictions overturned or his whole life tariff removed. His extended family remains convinced of his guilt. The Criminal Cases Review Commission referred the case to the Court of Appeal in 2001, which upheld the conviction in 2002. The appeal was rejected, and the CCRC rejected further applications from him in 2004 and 2012, with the Commission stating in 2012 that it had not identified any new evidence or legal argument culpable for raising a real possibility that his conviction would be quashed. On the 10th of March 2021, a new application was lodged with the CCRC for a referral to the Court of Appeal. As of 2025, he has spent 39 years in prison, making him one of the longest serving prisoners in the UK. The case is highly debated, and the trial actually, to me, looked a bit dodgy. It's reported that he will be appealing again. 81 Micheal Balajo and Michael Abi Bawali. Lee Rigby was a British Army soldier who was off duty when he was hit by a car and then had his life taken by these two men. They were identified and said that they did this to avenge the killing of Muslims by the British Armed Forces. They were both sentenced to life imprisonment. On the 17th of July, Abi Balajo lost 2 of his front teeth while being restrained by 5 prison officers at Belmarsh Prison. They both remain behind bars. 82 Wayne Couzens. On the evening of the 3rd of March 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard was kidnapped in South London as she was walking home to the Brixton Hill area from her friend's house near Clapham Common. She was stopped by off-duty Met Police officer Couzens, who identified himself as a police officer, handcuffed her and placed her in his car before taking her to Kent. He then arred and took her life. On the 9th of March, Couzens was arrested, first on suspicion of the kidnapping and a day later on suspicion of her murder. She was found near Ashford on the 10th of March. Following the identification, he was charged with her murder. Vigils were held for her on the evening of the 13th of March. On the 8th of June, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping and on the 9th of July, he pleaded guilty to her murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order on the 30th of September. After this, a public inquiry was commissioned to investigate how he was permitted to serve as a police officer, despite an extensive history of alleged S offences. The first part of the report, published in February 2024, found that he had a history of alleged S offending and that failings in the vetting process allowed him to become a police officer. He remains in prison. 83 Axel Ruda Cabana. On the 29th of July 2024, he targeted young girls at the Heart Space, a dance studio in the area of Southport in Merseyside. 17-year-old Axel took the lives of 3 children and injured 10 others at a Taylor Swift-themed yoga and dance workshop attended by 26 children. 2 of the young girls passed away at the scene. 6 injured children and 2 adults were taken by hospital in a critical condition, and a third passed away the following day. He was arrested at the scene and charged with 3 counts of murder, 10 counts of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article. He was then separately charged under the Biological Weapons Act of 1974 and Terrorism Act of 2000 in relation to the possession of some substances and a military study of an Al Qaeda training manual. He pleaded guilty to all 16 charges on the 20th of January 2025, when his trial was due to begin, having initially entered a not guilty plea. On the 23rd of January 2025, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 52 years. He took the lives of Alice, Bibi and Elsie. After he was found guilty and sent to prison, it came out in the press that he had a history of violence and concerning behaviour and had been referred to an anti-extremism programme Prevent Free 3 times before 2019 and 2021, but was not accepted into the scheme as no terrorist ideology was identified. He remains in prison. 84. Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile was a media personality and DJ. He was known for his eccentric image, for doing charity work and hosting the BBC show Top of the Pops and Jim Will Fix It. After he died, hundreds of allegations of SA were made against him and they were investigating, tarnishing his reputation and leading the police to conclude that he was a S offender and possibly one of Britain's most prolific. There had been allegations while he was alive, but they were dismissed and accusers were ignored or disbelieved. 85. Eddie Ratcliffe and Scarlett Jenkinson. On the 11th of February 2023, Brianna Gay, who was 16 years old and trans, had her life taken in a premeditated attack by Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe. They were both aged 15 at the time and were arrested the day after the attack and were eventually charged with murder. They were convicted on the 20th of December 2023 at Manchester Crown Court and were sentenced on the 2nd of February to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years for Jenkinson's and 20 years for Ratcliffe. They both remain in a youth offenders institution and will be moved to prison. 86. Ricky and Danny Preddy. Damilola Taylor was killed by the two brothers Ricky and Danny, who were then just aged 13 and 12, in November 2000. They were both convicted of manslaughter following 3 trials and were sentenced to 8 years in prison in 2007. They have since both been released. 87. Kevin Batty. Kevin Batty took the life of Jean Garrett in her home at West Hull during a siege in April 2003. Batty was 38 years at the time. He was sentenced to life in prison for taking the life of 47-year-old Jean on the 9th of April 2003. He is described as jealous and possessive. Batty forced his way into the home, he held the family hostage and took her life. He then barricaded himself and his daughter in one of the bedrooms and set fire to the curtains. They were only saved when police stormed the house. He was sentenced to life in prison in September 2003, but he has since been let free. 88. Mark Rickard and Aaron Knowles were just 19 and 17 when they attacked Jeff Lyon as he was outside a Hull nightclub. They kicked him around 100 times and then took his life. They were at Hull Crown Court in December 2003. The pair had pleaded guilty at an earlier hearing to murder. Both were sentenced to life imprisonment. They were told they must serve a minimum term of 12 years. Knowles has already been released from prison and Rickard is set to be freed this year. 89. Luke Micheal. Luke Micheal was charged with taking the life of his 14-year-old girlfriend Jodie Jones. Her family have said until he admits his guilt and shows some remorse for her death, he should never be set free. He was convicted in June 2003. The victim had been tied up and then had her life taken. She was then found in the woods. He has continued to protest his innocence and has never said that he has done it. He has tried to appeal, but these have been rejected. He remains in prison. 90. Gary Glitter. He was born Paul Gadd and is an English singer who achieved lots of success during the 1970s and 1980s. His career ended after he was convicted of downloading images in 1999. He was also convicted of child SA in 2006 and a series of S offences in 2015. He was first arrested in 1997 and convicted and imprisoned in 1999 for the images. He was acquitted of a charge of S activity with an underage girl in the 1970s. He later faced criminal charges and deportation from several countries charges in connection with both actual and suspected child SA. He was deported from Cambodia on suspected child SA charges in 2002 and settled in Vietnam, when a court found him guilty of acts with children in 2006. After serving his sentence, he was deported to the UK and was placed on the S Offenders Register for life. Glitter was arrested again in 2012 as part of Operation U-Tree. He was released on bail and was charged in 2014 with historical child S offences. In 2015 he was found guilty of 1 count of attempted R, 1 count of unlawful intercourse with a girl under the age of 13 and 4 counts of indecent assault. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. He was released on licence in February 2023 after serving half his sentence. He actually was moved to an area near to where I lived, and he was chased out of the area and had to be relocated. In the same year, he was recalled to prison for breaching the condition of his licence. His parole bid was denied in February 2024 and he remains in prison. 91. Will Cornick. Will Cornick took the life of his teacher. His teacher, Anne Maguire, was just 61 years old. 15-year-old Will Cornick took out a bladed item and then attacked her, taking her life on April 28, 2014 in Leeds. She was a well-loved Spanish teacher who had worked at the school for 40 years. In 2014, the trial heard how he had planned to take the life of 3 teachers, so he brought multiple weapons with him into school. He also took a bottle of Jack Daniels with him. It wasn't until the lesson had finished that Cornick, who was 6'2" tall, even at the age of just 15, then attacked his teacher. He was imprisoned at Leeds Crown Court for a minimum of 20 years. He has never shown any remorse for his actions. He lost an appeal against his sentence. He remains in prison. 92. Sharon Carr. At the age of 12 in June 1992, she took the life of 18-year-old Katie Ratcliffe at random as she walked home from a nightclub in Surrey. The murder initially went unsolved until June 1994, when Carr attacked and tried to take the life of another pupil at Collingwood College for no apparent reason, and then she boasted about taking the life of Katie to friends and family. She also wrote this in her diary entries in prison. She was convicted of the murder in 1997. She was ordered to serve at least 14 years imprisonment, but has remained imprisoned long after this minimum tariff has expired due to her disruptive behaviour in prison. She has a restricted status prisoner. She has continued to attack and attempt to take the life of staff members and fellow inmates, and has expressed her desire to take the lives of others. In September 2022, it was reported that her case would again go before the parole board. It was denied and she remains in prison. 93. Nicola Eddington. She took the life of her own mother in 2005. She then attacked 2 strangers in the street in 2011, taking the life of one. She was convicted of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility, attempted murder and murder. On the 4th of November 2005, she took the life of her 60-year-old mother, Marion, in East Sussex. She was convicted of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility. She was detained indefinitely under the Mental Health Act of 1983. Following treatment and psychiatric evaluation, she was released in September 2009. In September 2011, she sent a message via Facebook to her brother saying she was not getting the help she needed. On the 6th, 7th and 9th of October, she contacted police several times by phone and once in person, reporting that individuals were making threats against her. Later in the morning of the 10th of October 2011, while waiting for staff to change shift and admit her, she left the hospital through a door that should have been locked. She took 2 buses, attacked 2 strangers in the street. She bought a knife from Asda, which she tried to take the life of 22-year-old Kerry Clark. She survived. She stole a weapon from a butcher's shop and then took the life of 58-year-old Sally Hodkin. She was arrested later the same morning. On the 7th of February 2013 at the Old Bailey, she was convicted by jury of the attempted murder of Clark and of the murder of Hodkin. She was jailed on the 4th of March 2013 with a minimum tariff of 37 years. She remains in prison. 94. Savannah Brockhill. Star Hobson was her daughter and was born on the 19th of May 2019. Her parents were Frankie Smith and Jordan Hobson. She was a teenage mother. Smith was a month short of her 18th birthday at the time of her daughter's birth. Smith was later found by a clinical psychologist to have a low IQ of 70. In November of that year, Star's parents separated and her mother formed a relationship with Savannah Brockhill, who was a club bouncer. On the 27th of January 2020, a friend of Smith's made a referral to social services about Star's welfare. A social worker later visited the baby twice. During February, Brockhill sent a video to Smith's sister speculating that Smith may have cheated on her and calling herself a psycho who would attack someone tonight. On the 22nd of September, Star was playing with two other children at home when she was assaulted. The couple made internet searches related to treating shock in babies 15 minutes prior to making a 999 call. Star lost her life. On the 14th of December 2021, Savannah was convicted of murdering Star Hobson, while Frankie Smith was found guilty of causing or allowing her death. Savannah was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years, while Star's mother was sentenced to 8 years, which was later increased to 12 years by the Court of Appeal. They both remain in prison. 95 Thomas Mair. The 53-year-old took the life of mother of two and politician Joe Cox on the 16th of June 2016. He was found guilty and given a whole life order. 96 Barry Williams, also known as Harry Street. He took the lives of 5 on the 26th of October 1978. He lived at home with his parents and they had had some issues with their neighbours. On the evening of the 26th of October 1978, their neighbours George Burkett and his 20-year-old son Philip were working on Philip's car on their drive. At around 7 p.m, annoyed by the noise they were making, Williams attacked them and took both of their lives. He then took the life of George's wife, Iris. The Burkett's 17-year-old daughter was hit 4 times but thankfully survived. 2 other neighbours, a married couple who had witnessed the attack, also survived. He fled the scene, and as he was driving away, he shot at 2 boys aged 10 and 11, and a woman, but missed them all. At 8:10, he then took the lives of another married couple, Michael and Lisa Di Maria, after stopping to use the petrol filling station, which they ran. After a police chase, he was then arrested. He was charged with 5 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. In March 1979 at court, he pleaded not guilty to murder but instead pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The plea was accepted by the prosecution. He was held at Broadmoor Hospital and at Ashworth Hospital. He was released from hospital in 1994 once doctors and a mental health tribunal decided that he was no longer a risk to the public. He changed his name to Harry Street and was allowed to live in a bail hostel. He married in 1996 and had a child later that year. The family then moved to Birmingham in 2005. In October 2013, allegations came that he had waged a campaign of harassment against his next-door neighbour. Williams' home was searched by the West Midlands Police as part of their investigation, and he was found to be in possession of an improvised bomb, 50 homemade bullets and other firearms. In October 2014, he pleaded guilty to 3 charges of possessing prohibited firearms, to putting a neighbour in fear of violence and to making an explosive device. He was again ordered to be detained indefinitely. He remained in hospital until the 24th of December 2014, from when he died from a suspected heart attack. 97 Tracy Connolly. Her son was known as Baby P. Baby Peter, and on the 1st of March 2006, the 17-month-old had his life taken in London after suffering abuse for over an 8-month period. Peter's mother Tracy Connolly, her partner Stephen Barker and Jason Owen were all convicted of causing or allowing the death of a child. Connolly was sentenced to an indefinite imprisonment for public protection, subject to a minimum term of 5 years. Barker was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum sentence of 10 years. Owen was jailed indefinitely with a minimum term of 3 years. Owen was released in April 2013, but was recalled again. Connolly was released on licence in 2013, but returned to prison in 2015 for breaching her parole. Barker had an application for parole turned down in August 2017. Connolly was refused parole for a third time in December 2019. In May 2022, it was reported that Connolly would be released from prison. On the 7th of July 2022, she was given parole, but once again breached her licence conditions and was recalled to prison in September 2024, which is where she remains. 98. Raoul Moat. He attacked his ex-girlfriend Samantha Stobart, her new partner Chris Brown and police officer David Rathband. Stobart was hospitalised and Brown was killed, while Rathband remained in hospital for nearly 3 weeks and was permanently blinded. He took his own life on the 29th of February 2012. He committed these crimes just 2 days after his release from Durham prison. After taking the life of Chris Brown and injuring the 2 others, he went on the run for 6 days. He was recognised by police and contained in the open, leading to the standoff. After nearly 6 hours of negotiations, Moat took his own life. 99. Micheal Ryan. Micheal Ryan, who was 27 years old at the time, took the lives of 16 people on the 19th of August 1987. On the morning of Wednesday the 19th of August 1987, 27-year-old Micheal Ryan drove his silver Vauxhall Astra to a forest in Wiltshire 7 miles to the west of his hometown of Hungerford, in his car where he had a firearm. On that day, 35-year-old Susan Godfrey and her 2 preschool children had travelled to the forest and were having a picnic. At 12:30, Ryan, openly armed, approached the family. He placed the children in the car before taking the mother and taking her life. Ryan left the forest and drove east, stopping to fill both his car and petrol can at the Golden Arrow petrol station at around 12:35. Ryan then went to his family home that he shared with his mother. He was seen by neighbours who described him as looking upset. Soon after entering his house, one of the witnesses heard shots. Ryan took the lives of the 2 family dogs. He then left the house. He took the lives of 2 neighbours, Roland and Sheila Mason. A 14-year-old girl who also lived nearby heard the noise and went to see what it was. Ryan then shot at her 4 times. Thankfully, she survived. He then walked along a footpath towards the town's common. He took the life of 51-year-old Kenneth Clements. He then took the life of a police officer who arrived at the scene, PC Roger Bierton. Ryan then fired at a car, taking the life of George White. He followed up through the road and took the life of 84-year-old Abdur Khan, who was tending to his garden. Ryan's mum had been out shopping and saw that Micheal was armed. She shouted for him to stop. He fired at her and took her life. He then made his way to the War Memorial Recreation Grounds. He then took the life of 26-year-old Francis Butler. The next victim was taxi driver Marcus Bernard. At this point, police had put diversions. Douglas and Kathleen Wainwright were visiting their son and were diverted to approach from the south where Ryan was, approximately 100 yards from their destination. Ryan took the life of Douglas and then injured Kathleen before trying to shoot at other drivers. He then went towards the junction and took the life of Eric Vardy, who was in his van. Driving her car, Sandra Hill, who was 22 years old, also lost her life. He then forced his way into a house further down the road and took the lives of 66-year-old Jack Gibbs and his 62-year-old wife Myrtle. He left the house and then shot at a car that was being driven by 34-year-old Ian Plale. He lost his life. He barricaded himself in a primary school that was shut for the summer, threatening the police that he had grenades and other ammunition. At 8 p.m, the police entered the room to find that he had taken his own life. There is actually no real motive for the crimes. The newspapers speculated that Ryan was inspired by viewing video nasties. He liked Soldier of Fortune and the Rambo films. Ryan had neither previous criminal convictions nor a record of medical or mental health problems. 100. Jack the Ripper. He is an unidentified serial killer who was active in and around Whitechapel, England in 1888. He took the lives of Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes and Mary Jane Kelly. The crimes were very violent. There have been many theories and many suspects as to who Jack the Ripper is, but researcher Russell Edwards believes he knows who it is. In 2007, he bought a shawl thought to have been found at the scene of Eddowes' murder. On Edwards' request, he then sent it for DNA and forensic sampling. It showed that Aaron Kominski, who was a Polish immigrant working as a hairdresser in Whitechapel around the time of the Ripper murders. According to the scientist, DNA matched samples taken from Eddowes' descendant and a descendant of Kominski's sister. In the news, the researcher Edwards said he thinks the Jack the Ripper identity mystery is now over, although other experts have questioned the various forensic tests that have been done. One major issue is the lack of firm evidence that the shawl was even at the crime scene in the first place. The DNA results are not as 100% as they might initially seem, as well as contamination of the item over time. The case isn't closed. Although it's good there is movement in the case, like I said, still isn't closed, and there is still lots of doubt surrounding this researcher, and it still remains one of Britain's biggest mysteries. And that concludes our video today. This was obviously a very long video, but like I said in the intro, it's to celebrate that we reached 10k subs and going over some of the criminals that we have covered in the past year. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time.